All right, welcome everybody to our January webinar, the American Solar Energy Society's webinar series. I'm just going to give everyone a minute or two to join the webinar room before we get started. Feel free to use the chat room to talk to each other if you're having any issues. In here, we can talk in the public chat room, and if any questions come up during the webinar, please add them to the Q&A section of the chat room. Just going to give some people a couple more seconds to join in before we get started. All right, well, thank you everyone for joining us for this January webinar. The next ASES webinar will be on February 26th at noon Mountain Time, if you want to mark your calendars for that. We will be moving to GoToWebinar for the continuation for our webinar series. So feel free to find us on that and start following our channel there. All future ASES webinars will be free only to ASES members. Another thing to keep in mind, please join or renew today for priority access and free access to our webinars at ases.org/join or ases.org/renew. I also want to let everybody know that you can register now for our 49th Annual National Solar Conference happening June 23rd to the 26th in Washington, D.C. at the George Washington University. I'd also like to let everybody know that the call for participation has an extended deadline to February 1st. So please feel free to submit to our call for participation for Solar 2020 Renewable Energy Vision by February 1st. For more information on how you can register or submit to the call, please visit ases.org/conference, or you can also contact me at solar2020@ases.org. That is my email address. All right, so now let me go ahead and introduce our webinar today. Our webinar today has been brought to us by John Powers of Extensible Energy and Lucas. Ooh, Lucas. How do you pronounce your last name?
Oehlerking. And
Oehlerking.
Carly, some folks in the chat were mentioning they don't have sound on their end. Maybe we could confirm that some people are getting sound.
Yeah, that's great. Anyone in the chat room receiving audio?
Okay, some people do. So I would maybe just check their system setting.
Yeah. If you guys are having any audio issues, you can always get out of the webinar and come back in. It does require a pretty good Wi-Fi to get the best audio and visual.
And I believe we had a question about the dial-in number. Could we just do you have the ability to put that up on the screen for just 1 minute while we get things started here?
Yeah, I don't believe there should not be a dial-in. That should just be computer audio only. I don't think there is a dial-in option for this webinar.
I see.
But also, if you're in webcast mode, there should be the option to join without being on webcast. Webcast usually has a couple minute waiver between audio, so you'll get it a couple seconds after I send it out. All right. Well, let me go ahead and do some intros, and then I will work on getting that sound up and running for you guys. Let me introduce the webinar today is how to raise the ROI for commercial solar projects. No batteries required. We have Lucas Oehlerking, commercial solar manager at Veatch? Black and Veatch?
Yes, Black and Veatch.
Awesome. I'm glad I pronounced that correctly. So Luke is manager of the commercial solar business at Black & Veatch Global Distributed Energy Team. He has led the development of innovative business areas focused on energy storage, microgrids, and residential and commercial rooftop solar. He's actively working with clients to help them meet their sustainability goals with a variety of on-site or distributed solar, photovoltaic, energy storage, demand response, and microgrid solutions. John Powers is the founder and CEO of Extensible Energy. He is an energy economist and entrepreneur with 3 decades of experience in renewables, energy efficiency, demand response, and related fields. Extensible Energy delivers load flexibility software that integrates with solar installations for dramatic improvements in ROI through demand charge and TOU savings. I'd also like to put up a poll for everyone asking what your primary job activity is. If you go to the poll section of the chat room, you can fill it out here. I will go ahead and turn it over to John and Luke, and I will work on getting this audio up and running.
Thanks very much, Carly. Yeah, I think some people are saying in the chat that they are getting sound, and some are saying they still don't have it. So if you can maybe text them some messages. Some are saying the sound is just turned on, others say it's still not there. So not sure if that's on our end or what. I hear both Carly and Luke just fine. So I'm going to just launch in here because I want to make sure we get a good recording out of this. And if you can work behind the scenes, Carly, that'd be great.
Yeah, thank you, John.
So we want to talk today about how commercial solar developers can take advantage of new technology to deliver bigger savings and a higher return on investment for solar projects in commercial buildings. And we refer to this technology as load flexibility software, which is a more advanced solar aware form of energy management. It's inexpensive, it's simple to install, you can do it in a day during a typical solar installation project, and it helps save you money for your customers even as commercial rates change. But we want to start with an eye on some trends in utility rates. We'll provide an update on demand charges. I'll give a few ideas of where we see paths to success in the commercial solar field in the next year and beyond. We'll talk briefly about a specific solution called DemandX. We'll show you a case study, and then Luke from Black & Veatch can walk through a bit of their own experience in this market, including a case study. We'll wrap up with plenty of time for Q&A, especially for the people who can hear. So I want to do more than just sort of talk about the changes in utility rates. I want to be more specific and focus on how those changes pose challenges to the economics of solar projects. And we'll discuss then how the evolving ecosystem of commercial solar developers and their partners is addressing those changes. Okay, so that's where we're going. So I think a lot of you know that utilities, basically, they create their rates in order to cover costs one way or another from all the customers they serve, plus a guaranteed profit. Must be nice. When I grow up, I want to be a monopoly, but I digress. They're supposed to create tariffs that reflect the cost of serving each customer class. So let's look at the various rates for which small, medium, and large customers are eligible. This is a chart from the California Solar and Storage Association that shows some of the recent changes in rates from Southern California Edison, one of the nation's largest electric utilities. So there's multiple tariffs for commercial customers, but let's just have a look at the GS2 rate, which affects a huge number of customers between, say, 20 kilowatts and 200 kilowatts maximum demand. First thing you can see is that SCE has set the peak period for each weekday from 4 to 9 p.m. That's much later than it used to be. It used to be noon to 6 p.m. And in part, that's because solar has been so successful. We're now generating so much clean solar power in the middle of the day in California that the middle of the day is no longer the highest cost period of the day. So good for us, except that's bad news for future solar, because the prices at SCE are now highest when solar output is low or zero. So look at the demand charge on GS2D. So there's two options in the GS2 rate, D and E. So in GS2D, that's an $11.41 demand charge on the maximum monthly peak, plus $26.81 for the peak that occurs between 4 and 9 p.m. If your maximum net usage is during that 4 to 9 p.m. period, those two numbers add. So that's a total demand charge of over $38. Well, then clearly we must want to go to option E, right? We might want to escape these high demand charges by switching to their E rate, which has lower demand charges, right? Well, yes, it has lower demand charges, but that option has all the energy consumed in that 4 to 9 period is now charged more than 46 cents per kilowatt hour. So they get you one way or the other. And this is the kind of environment we're all moving into. And it's not exactly what I would call solar friendly. And again, that's a California example. And I realize that not everybody is from California. This one here is recently there was a filing where PG&E requested new commercial and industrial rates, including daily demand charges, super off-peak rates in periods similar to SCE's. And while there are some storage incentives, they have very tight caps on program enrollment. So it's good to have software that controls flexible building load in response to these changes in economic incentives. And we'll get to that in a minute. Outside of California, well, things aren't getting much better. I know most of our audience is from outside California, as are most of our customers and immediate prospects. The movement everywhere is toward high demand charges, nearly nationwide, as our friends at NREL have documented. This is a graph from an excellent NREL report that shows where the maximum demand charges by utility are above different levels. So it's common to see 20 to 30 and even over $30 per kilowatt demand charges. One of the reasons we're so pleased to be working with Black & Veatch is that we can now address opportunities in nearly every state. We've had inquiries from Minnesota, Michigan, Utah, Colorado, Florida, North and South Carolina, New York, New Jersey. Really, this issue is much more pervasive than a lot of people realize. And why does this matter? Well, I think most of you know, even the best designed, best controlled buildings don't control demand charges. This is a typical office building with a nice big solar installation on the roof. This is a whole month of data, okay? So this is 31 days of data from May of last year. So what happened here? Week by week, the solar is doing what it's supposed to. It's generating power all the time when the sun is out. And on weekends, you can see all the weekends there, it's selling back to the grid because the building is turning off its energy management system is turning off the HVAC systems and other systems to conserve energy, which is just what it's supposed to do. And yet, here we come to the end of the month where there's a 3-day weekend when it got hot. And it's 90 degrees inside that building when people are going to come to work. So it says, hey, it's Tuesday, it's 90 degrees, and I'm supposed to be at 72. And it turns on all the pumps and compressors and fans and everything all at once and sends a big fat bill to the poor building owner because that one operating mistake takes out all the savings for the solar in the month. So really, what happens next? Well, nothing, because nobody's watching this. The building owner gets grumpy with the utility. That's not a change. He's been grumpy with the utility all along, but he's also grumpy with whoever sold him the solar system because it's not delivering on the savings that he was promised. There's got to be a better way. So this brings me to the changes that are coming, and I would contend changes that are already here, to the best way to sell more commercial solar systems. In the old days, this market was frankly about panel salesmen. Explain how solar works, explain who has the best panel, that's me. Explain that it won't hurt the roof, say that it'll save energy in the environment, climb a ladder, hook it up. So in the 2020s, that just won't cut it because the tariff economics I just described mean that the economics of a solar system alone are not nearly as favorable as they once were. That means no matter how good the panels are or how good a salesman you are, you need something more in your bag of tricks to succeed in the 2020s. In every market, every tech market in particular, there comes a time when hardware becomes commoditized and software becomes the differentiator. Software drives markets for cars, for air travel, for package delivery, for retail sales, for everything, 1,000 other markets in ways that we didn't even imagine a few years ago. And now is that time in the solar industry. Only software that monitors customer energy usage and solar output, software that calculates the optimal changes to flexible load to match the solar output, software that changes the economics back in favor of solar solutions can help you create a solution that beats your competition and saves your customers more. And that means partnerships. It's not just just as you have your favorite panel maker and your favorite inverter maker and your favorite racking system, you need somebody who understands the load shapes of the prospects, understands the equipment and customer requirements that are causing those load shapes, and understands the technology that can change those load shapes to better align with the system that you're proposing. So you guys know today, the commercial solar software companies in the ecosystem. You might work with Energy Toolbase to create quotes. You might work with Utility API to get access to your utility data. You might work with PV Complete or Helioscope to design the layout of the system. Soon you'll also work with a company, either like ours or somebody else, to affect the load shape of your customers 24/7 to raise the ROI on your customer projects. And the system we've come up with is called DemandX. It's a machine learning based system that takes a look at the history of the building to learn its energy usage patterns. It forecasts what the solar output will be and what the whole building load will be. And it turns that into signals to all the flexible loads in the building to adjust the loads to match the output of the solar. And it acts as a virtual battery, basically by controlling the flexible loads, by which I mean either physical batteries, car chargers behind the meter, but most especially heating and cooling, which is something that is in nearly all buildings. Nobody cares when the compressors run. They only care that it's comfortable inside. A smart reshaping of your flexible loads provides far better impact than batteries. If it sounds like a battery, it is like a battery. It's a virtual battery made from software that costs 1/10 or 1/20 what a physical battery would, with no permits, no fire suppression, no master electricians, no critical loads panels, none of the hassles that make it so hard to incorporate batteries into solar solutions. We're going to do a quick case study about a single building we worked on with one of our solar partners in Bakersfield. It's a good-sized church with Wednesday evening services that start at 6:30. Bakersfield, if you don't know California, it's in the Central Valley, a very hot region. Demand peaks are set at 108 degrees Fahrenheit, and 6:30, of course, is when the solar has almost entirely rolled off. So there's almost no contribution of the solar to the output at the time of the customer peak. And with a 100 kW solar array, the church is saving almost 100% of its monthly energy use, but none of the demand charge, which in this case was over $20 a month. I'm sorry, $20 a kilowatt. And by putting some simple smart thermostats and intelligent control and 24/7 monitoring and our DemandX control strategy in place, we were able to save 51 kilowatts during the hottest months. And that's over $1,000 a month in savings. It's a complex site with something like 15 separate cooling units, but it was up and running in a day, and we were able to reduce demand by 30% or more. That solar installer was impressed and started incorporating the DemandX in future proposals. And you can see that when you go from a system before PV to after PV, where you're saving energy, essentially energy only and not demand, you have something on the order typically of a 6.5 or 7 year payback, and you're able to reduce their bill by half. But to be able to reduce the bill further, you have to address the demand charge. If you add DemandX to the equation, you have more like a 4.5 year payback, much lower total bill, and you really get a much more compelling proposal that goes to your customer. So basically, I'm going to actually, I see that maybe I've been babbling too much. I can leave this slide up there for a sec. All of this is just to say we deliver this as software as a service, and we reduce demand charges by 20 to 40%. But I'm going to let, don't take my word for it. We're going to let Luke talk a little bit about some of the things he's seeing and some of the projects he's developing, and something he's seeing in the 2020s. So
sure.
Luke, why don't you tell us what Black & Veatch is up to in the commercial space?
Sounds good. Thanks so much, John. Can you hear me okay?
You sound great.
Cool. Yeah, so I'm Luke Oehlerking, manager of the commercial solar business area here at Black & Veatch. And like John said, I'll just talk a little bit about BV, Black & Veatch, and what we're doing in the commercial solar area, and talk about some interesting projects where this has come up quite a bit recently. So yeah, Black & Veatch is a global engineering and construction company, and we do business in power, water, and telecommunications. So not just the renewable space, but we span a lot of different industries. One thing we really pride ourselves on is that we have been in business for over 100 years. We have reached that milestone in the last few years here. And I think it's really a result of our 10,000 plus global professionals and our focus on high quality work, where we really put the client first. And I think that's led to this recent ranking here, where we're one of the top 10 solar contractors according to Solar Power World. But we're really proud of our history and our quality work here. And recently, we've really ramped up our focus on the distributed side of the energy landscape. On the right side of this graph here, we've really started to focus on innovative technologies like John's product, and focus on processes that are better equipped for this space. And we've ramped up our investment there, where we formed a business line, and that's the group that I'm a part of. But yeah, like I said, we're very focused on different approaches, innovative approaches, and technologies like John's product. And so with that, we installed one at our Livermore, California location, really to get a hands-on experience with the product. And as John likes to say, it was an easy peasy installation. It integrates nicely with our existing solar monitoring software, monitoring software and devices that we have in the field. And this was really timely for us, because I was continuing to have a conversation, with clients about demand charges. It comes up quite often, and our clients are increasingly aware that solar, as John mentioned, not only or really just focuses on the energy side of the equation. It doesn't touch the demand side of their bill. Well, very limited, at least. And so this has come up a lot with customers. And I think with talking about the demand side of the equation, it opens a lot of doors for clients that were otherwise closed or otherwise marginal projects. Kind of like the example that John shared in the previous slides. And so just real quick, an example of where this has come up is a manufacturing client in the Southeast where we originally scoped their project, and it was, not a slam dunk necessarily of a project where it was, over 10 years payback. And their goal was really to get this to 10 years or under. And so when we looked at the demand side and how much we could possibly reduce that with DemandX inside, it got us to about the threshold that they're looking for. And this was part of their broader sustainability goals to really, leverage solar on multiple sites to reduce their greenhouse gas emissions. And so their threshold was, probably higher in terms of payback than some of the clients that the folks on the line have, but it balanced the rest of their portfolio and the rest of their goals nicely. So that was their goal, and I think, considering the demand charges really helps us try to meet those goals. And of course, there was an additional, almost $500,000 in additional value there that the client now has access to by looking at this combination of solar and demand charge management. So those are just a few examples of how this has come up at Black & Veatch and a little bit of background about us. I'm happy to take any questions here in a little bit, but I'll turn it back to you, John.
Attendee put into the chat that was turning into a sales pitch, and I did mean to drop that last slide. I apologize for that. What we're trying to describe is the ecosystem that we see developing, and I did mention at least 4 or 5 other software companies that I think are doing a terrific job in helping solar installers to become more of a total energy management solution provider and not just, as I was saying before, panel salesman. So we see our role in that ecosystem as helping with demand. There are numerous other problems that other vendors have also helped with. I want to stress that we're 100% partner focused. We don't go direct to customers. So we're trying to stake out a particular role in this ecosystem where we can help solar installers to make more solar deals pay off. The next decade, we'll see more solar deployed than has been deployed in the past 45 years, and that by a factor of at least 5 or 10. So this is going to be where the decade where solar really takes off, and we're pretty focused on the mission of making sure that commercial solar pulls its weight as the solar industry moves forward. So with that, I'm going to pause for questions and say that both Luke and I will be down at Intersolar if you want to meet with us in person. You see our booth, and I guess Black & Veatch doesn't have a booth, but it has a large contingent that will be there and can be met on the exhibit floor. Is that right, Luke?
Yep.
Okay. So yeah, why don't we pause there and take some of the questions. So there was one question I saw that was more about there's a lot of questions about the sound, unfortunately. So there was a question about whether we had a ROI spreadsheet that we use. So we're big fans of Energy Toolbase, but we've also worked with Aurora and some of the other systems that are out there that do a great job in assisting with those calculations. So yes, we do some post-processing of that sometimes, but I think some of the tools that are already out there beat the spreadsheet approach hands down. And Carly, do you want to farm out any of these other questions? We're getting some good engagement here.
Yeah, definitely. So that question was from Tim Golden. Do you have an ROI calculator / spreadsheet available? Which I'm assuming you had just answered, or did you?
Yeah, that's the one. Yeah, that's the one.
Great. So one question from James Orenstein. With so many rate structure changes coming, how do you address estimating commercial projects of all types ROI? Question.
Yeah, so again, it makes me just, I don't want to do a commercial for another company either, any more than I want to do one for our own. But I will say Energy Toolbase keeps a handle on the rate database very well. I understand Aurora does too. I haven't worked as much with that product. I know that even the folks at NREL attempt to keep in a free system, attempt to keep a pretty good handle on what's going on with rates. Once the at least as important as the rate is the individual customer historic load shape. So something like Green Button, which is supported by some utilities, or Utility API, which has a great system for getting access to 15-minute data for commercial customers, is key in being able to make a very accurate projection of what the ROI on a particular customer under a particular rate structure will be. Beyond that, NREL has resources through OpenEI for more of a typical building type, so medium office or large office. They have their typical load shape in a particular region. So you need to use some tools for careful modeling of historic load shapes in order to get an accurate picture of what the ROI on a solar project would be. And then you need to work with either us at Extensible Energy or at a provider of battery storage systems for what would happen after a new technology is inserted into that load shape.
All right. Great. And so Drew has a couple of related questions. What is the cost of software on a typical install, the monthly cost of running it, the CapEx of the software product, and whether it works with or without solar? So
Right. So as I said, we partner exclusively with solar providers. So even if you could claim that this works without solar, we have not gone to market that way. Solar takes care of a lot of the usage patterns characterized by a load shape. I can follow up with Drew after to draw in some pictures.
Yeah.
So our impact is much greater when combined with solar. And what was the first part of the question? How much is it? Yeah, we go on a shared savings model. Basically, if we save the customer $1, we keep 33 cents. We can, give rough ballpark examples of what that looks like in a 5-year deal with a small to medium commercial customer. It's anywhere from, call it $15,000 to $50,000, which is the 5-year payment of of what's a monthly subscription fee, basically. And usually, a 5 or even 10-year upfront payment can be rolled in with the capital cost of the system for a ITC benefit. At least, again, I'm not your tax advisor, talk to your tax guy, but that's what some of our partners have told us.
All right. Question from Tor Valenza. What's the difference between your load flexibility software and managing demand charges with batteries?
Yeah, so I mean, I love batteries. I drove a battery to work today. But in typical small to medium commercial buildings, the battery is the least of the cost. There's always permitting, fire suppression, custom engineering, master electricians, all the stuff that make the economics not pay off as well. Batteries are great in providing resilience and not so great at just managing demand charges. You need to size. It's always better to take the low-hanging fruit first with either some form of energy management, whether from our company or somebody else's, and then right size the battery for the last bits. So batteries are really where solar was 10 years ago. Some people want them because they want them, but the economics have been very tough to make pay off unless the state is providing massive, massive subsidies.
Great. Let's see what else we've got here. Another question comment from James Orenstein. ROI calculations seem to frequently overestimate future costs of electricity in general and underestimate shifts to rate structures as T&D utilities would describe, avoid cost shifting from those with distributed resources to those without. The general comment?
Well, I certainly agree with the first part of that. Certainly there have been a lot of folks who have overestimated the escalation rate of and especially wholesale electricity prices. The cost shifting definitely goes both ways and is very case by case dependent. If you're able to address both energy and demand, if the utility has set the prices correctly, you are not shifting costs. You're in fact helping the utility avoid costs. So this quickly gets into electric utility rate design as much as anything else, and cost allocation, which is sort of where I grew up, and I'm sure we could have a fun conversation, but I bet we could clear the room if we go much further into that.
So Tyler and Conrad have some follow-up questions in regards to the storage technology. Does this integrate with other solar monitoring systems, and can it be combined as technology with batteries?
And maybe I'll jump in on the integration one from an implementation side, and John, feel free to jump in as well. But it seems pretty versatile in what it can integrate with. We looked at a variety of monitoring devices that, I think as long as it can communicate with that device, I think your existing equipment should be okay. We could certainly check to make sure, and certainly as part of the engineering for your project, you'll want to do that. But we haven't had any problem with it integrating with ours.
Right.
And I'll let you speak to the battery side of things, because it sounds like it can play with other technologies as well.
For sure. And I think I alluded to this in the last answer. Yes, we can integrate with batteries. And what we have found is that if you use smart control of the flexible loads first, you can actually make more batteries pay off. You make you can right size the battery. So it might be a smaller battery at each facility, but you would find more facilities where they make sense, because you're not buying a battery just to hit the worst mistake of the month. So we have a project going in Colorado at a car dealer where there's a significant solar installation and a battery that we're controlling through the microgrid controller. So they bought the battery primarily for resilience purposes, but we're able to use up to half the capacity to add to the demand management that we're providing where we're also controlling the HVAC systems. So yeah, definitely the software plays well with batteries and any flexible load, and the batteries are just another great flexible load in that circumstance. And with respect to the monitoring, yeah, we've worked with multiple different monitoring systems. What we need is 1 minute data. We need something that will provide minute by minute load readings from the whole building and from the solar, because that's what gives you the ability to react in time to demand spikes, which are typically calculated over a 15-minute interval. So we do a lot of forecasting to make sure we're getting we're getting the building ready to not hit a peak demand. But if we do see you're about to hit a peak demand, we still want to be able to avoid it, for which we need 1 minute data.
Great. Richard Brown has asked, have you done load shaping with solar thermal or PVT combined PV and solar module installations?
Never have, would love to give it a shot.
All right. And Conrad is asking a question. What is the quote unquote box being installed as part of the Extensible Energy service?
We have a little IOT gateway that enables the communication with the devices inside the building. All of the forecasting and optimization runs up in the cloud, but there's a little gateway that speaks all the different protocols that building energy systems speak, be it BACnet or Wi-Fi or Zigbee or Z-Wave or anything else. So we put what is basically an industrial PC into the building, but you get more karma points for calling it an IoT gateway. So yeah, that's it. That's the only extensible equipment that goes in. In some cases where you have a building with dumb thermostats, you also might want to change them out to put smart thermostats in, and we've worked with a couple of different kinds of smart thermostats from different vendors. That's what you saw that picture Luke showed of one of the Black & Veatch professionals installing thermostats in their Livermore building. So that, again, that's not our equipment at all. That's off the shelf smart thermostats. But those are the only things. Yeah, there you go. That's the only 2 bits that we need to put in.
Great. And follow-up question from Richard Brown. Do you get better returns in the residential market in multifamily or single family?
We have not worked in the residential market at all because there are rarely any demand charges in that market. In some multifamily common area spaces, the meter is considered a commercial meter and could qualify. We haven't done one of those buildings yet.
And Tor Valenza is asking also, how does DemandX work with any size/type of commercial solar installation?
And Patrick kind of asked a similar one. Can it be used in heavy industrial buildings?
Mm-hmm.
Are there limitations on system sizes or type of buildings that you would go after? And I'll probably let you start that one.
I'll start, and we can, because you and I are working on one that is a little bit of a stretch for us. So yeah, we have focused on sort of small to medium commercial buildings where HVAC is the largest load, and that's office, retail, church, school, conditioned warehouse, municipal building, those kind of things. A very large industrial facility would have probably its own complicated industrial controls management system, and we have not integrated with any of those. It's not something we are, frankly, as a company, ready to do probably for another year or more. But we're looking at it because there's a lot of industrial prospects that our partners are bringing to us. And so, I can't get into the specifics, but we're working on one sort of, I would call it a small to medium industrial facility, more of the sort of megawatt or two level installation where there's both HVAC and certain processes that the customer is willing to control, where we, with Black & Veatch, are investigating what the best methods of control would be. We certainly have the sort of software in the cloud ready for that. It's the integration piece in terms of talking directly to the building where we're still working out the specifics of how we would control those more custom pieces of equipment. Because with HVAC, we just go through the thermostat, which is a much easier way, or through the existing backnet control in the building, which is an easier way to sort of softly control the buildings.
Conrad is asking if you guys have had any experience with hotels or motels that's like larger scale, but then working with small individual room controls.
So the individual room controls are kind of a difficult piece of economics because in many cases it would mean replacing hundreds of relatively dumb thermostats that talk to individual devices in the rooms. It would depend. We haven't done one yet. We've had several brought to us where the legacy systems were just, it would be prohibitively expensive to retrofit the whole building. But we've got some ideas, so we certainly would take a look.
And if you guys can see John and Luke, if you guys can see the Q&A area, there's some questions in here that I'm not sure exactly how to interpret, but Richard Brown is asking about the smallest job size, usage over kilowatt demand, and then
he's kind of asking what portion of your bill is really required for this to make sense from a payback standpoint.
Yeah, so good rule of thumb is if you have maybe 20,000 of demand charges per year or more, there's probably a good fit. Much smaller than that, it would depend on the economics of the, how easy it would be to install in one day. So the rule of thumb we use around here is 20,000 a year or more in demand charges, or in sort of aggressive time of use energy price differences.
Great. And then Drew has some questions or comments in here that, again, I'm not quite sure how to interpret, but he's asking how to incorporate short and long-term WX forecast. I'm not sure what WX is.
I'm guessing weather.
I'm guessing weather.
Weather forecast.
Okay.
And you factor in both weather and from a solar production standpoint and how that affects the load.
Yeah, we factor in weather as both on the load side and on the generation side, right? Because what we're really calculating for demand charges is net load. And we have a machine learning algorithm that adjusts some of the commercially available solar forecasts to incorporate very recent hyper-local data about the individual building. And then we have, equally important is the forecast of what the whole building load will be. And that's a function of both weather and past historical information about the building. So yeah, we're big consumers of all kinds of weather data, including one of the commercial vendors' irradiance data forecasts, and then we throw that all into our machine learning algorithms to improve on that.
So are you guys still in like a startup phase, or are you guys like full blown like doing installs and everything right now? Or
so we are sort of in the bridge between that. We have 8 buildings that we have done a lot of this got started under a Department of Energy Small Business Innovation Research grant. Tip of the hat to the Solar Energy Technology Office for helping get this off the ground. But yeah, we now have multiple paying customers, commercial partners, commercial solar installer partners who are selling, and a growing backlog of sites that we are installing and more that we're analyzing for installation. So we're a startup with paying customers and signed up distributors.
Awesome. So let's get one last question in from Drew, and then maybe go over some final questions and comments from both John and you, Luke. So Drew's asking, how good is the match predicted load to actual? Okay, wait. So how good is the match predicted load to actual, particularly at a building's peak?
Right. So, I mean, the trick is to be good enough to reduce demand for the customer for the month. So we have gotten very good at forecasting both the controllable and uncontrollable loads in the building. And when we miss, and again, demand charge management is all about the worst mistake you make during the month. When we miss, as I mentioned before, that's why we have access to the 1-minute data, so that we can adjust loads even when our forecasts are not perfect. And so the trick is to forecast well, because you'll never forecast perfectly, and then adjust if you miss, and we do that as well. So the trick isn't just how good is your forecast, which is good and getting better all the time. More data makes it better, but also the ability to adjust in near real time the loads of the building based on what the whole building net meter is showing us.
Awesome. Well, those are great questions and comments that we've gotten from everyone. So John or Luke, do you have any final follow-ups for anyone on the webinar today?
No, I think those were great questions, and thanks for including me in this. And we've enjoyed working with John, and we think this is a really interesting area to keep tabs on, and think it's really important work. So yeah, thanks again.
Yeah, and I'll echo that. I'll say we got Carly. I really appreciate your participation, because we just got excellent engagement from some of the folks who are in the webinar. And I again would just invite folks to come and engage with us in person down in San Diego, because Intersolar is coming, and we can walk through any of the questions you have in as much detail as you want, because we really want to be part of the ecosystem that is really going to shape the next decade in commercial solar. I think the potential is huge. I think that some of the issues that were brought up during the Q&A about the strain on transmission systems and all the rest are made better, not worse, by putting the solar nearer the load, and there's nothing nearer than on-premise with the load. So we're big proponents of distributed energy resources in general, and how they can help propel this industry over the next decade.
Yeah, and I want to thank both John and Luke for joining us on the webinar this month. Amazing content. And again, super relatable to all of the things going on in solar and storage right now on the commercial level. So I really appreciate you guys joining us this month, and hope you can join us again for a webinar in the future. This has been great content, and I really appreciate you guys taking time out of your day to share it with the American Solar Energy Society and our members and anyone else who joined the webinar today.
Okay,
thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks, everyone. And I want to remind everyone on the webinar today, this is the last free webinar. So in the future, we'll be moving to GoToWebinar, and you will need to be a member of ASES for free access. As a non-member, you'll still be able to join the webinar, but for a small fee. So be sure to join ases.org/join and register for the conference, ases.org/conference. And don't forget to submit to the call for participation that will be open until February 1st. And John and Luke, I hope you decide to submit as well, and we'll get to see everyone in Washington, D.C. in June. All right. Thank you, everybody. And we'll talk to you all soon and see you on the next webinar.
Thank you.
Thanks.